All right. Once again, good day, uh, everybody. Uh, our topic for today is all about the phases of criminal investigation. No? Phases of criminal investigation. So remember this, criminal investigation is a procedure. It is a formal procedure or process that is conducted uh, significantly when ever a crime has been uh, identified or discovered for purposes of accomplishing its aims, the three aims of criminal investigation. And of course, to have uh, justice be served uh, properly. So, with that, this topic, phases of criminal investigation, will enlighten your mind that whenever there is a crime, and investigation is necessary, then as investigators, you should follow the phases or the steps of criminal investigation, starting from the first thing to do until the last thing to do, no, which is to uh, prove the guilt of uh, an accused in the court of law. So, also, these phases of criminal investigation will emphasize uh, that whenever you are able, as investigator, you are able to uh, undergo these phases of uh, criminal investigation from phase one until the last phase, then if you are able to finish them and complete them and properly finish them, then basically you will have uh, what we call successful criminal investigation. Oh, that's the time that there is what we say a crime is solved. Okay, so the first phase that an investigator will start with in his investigation is phase one. No, we call it the preliminary or initial investigation. You know, I would like to reiterate again that if they will ask you when shall criminal investigation starts, when shall criminal investigation starts? So the very answer for that matter is that criminal investigation starts uh, criminal investigation starts upon the arrival of the first responders at the crime scene. So when there is a crime reported or discovered and uh, the first responder uh, responded or arrived at the crime scene, then that is the start of criminal investigation. Okay? So with that, uh, upon the arrival of the first responder, they have the responsibilities to do. No? Again, let me repeat. So upon the arrival of the first responder, let me just cite one responsibility. Upon arrival as first responders, you have to establish if there is crime scene emergency. Now, what are examples of crime scene emergency? there are victims at the crime scene, or people in the crime scene that need medical attention. There is between life and death. Then as first responders, you have to do the necessary action. You have to give first aid if necessary and bring it to the nearest clinic or hospital. Remember this, as first responders or as law enforcers, as investigators, only a licensed physician, uh, a medical legal practitioner can declare that the person is dead in cases of homicide cases. No? So basically, the first thing to do is to uh, observe if there is a need for medical attention. Then, of course, uh, if there is no vehicle, then you can call for backup, for ambulance, for the proper authorities. Okay? Then second, crime scene emergency is when the suspects or possible suspects are there at the crime scene upon arrival, and they are armed and they are a threat in your own assessment. Then basically that is a crime scene emergency that you need a backup from your friendly forces. Okay? So those are some of the crime scene emergencies. Do not just go and cordon the area. No. So secondly, after that, after establishing the crime scene emergency, then you may now secure uh, the crime scene. How to secure? Cordon the crime scene. How to cordon? You may use the common one, that is the use of the police line to protect the integrity of the crime scene. No? So that is your first function, to cordon the crime scene and wait for the arrival of the investigating team or the investigators on case. Because ang mga first responders, basically and commonly, they are not the one who will handle formally the investigation of the crime scene and as a whole, the conduct of criminal investigation. So, in actual, no, when crime arises or committed, the one that have jurisdiction over the investigation is of course the police station that have jurisdiction over the area. Okay, but of course, as I said, no, the first responders commonly will turn over the crime scene upon the arrival of the investigating team or the investigators on case. Yung SOCO, yung scene of crime operation team, no? Sila ay isang special unit of the PNP that gives technical assistance, especially during crime scene investigation or processing of the crime scene whenever a local police investigating team or IOC or investigators on case uh, decided, no, or after evaluation, the crime scene or the crime itself is sensational. In other words, they lack the expertise to process the crime scene, then they can call or request, that is the proper term, request for the assistance of the SOCO team. Okay? So that is how the first phase of criminal investigation starts, the preliminary or initial uh, investigation. Okay? So in preliminary investigation, it involves the first exposure of the criminal offense to the investigative process. It serves as the foundation for the case. Kaya pag mali-mali ka sa preliminary mo, then wala kang gagawin at basis for the following phases of criminal investigation. So what are the things to consider in phase 1? So sa phase 1, andyan lahat. Arrival of the first responder, then arrival of the investigating team to evaluate or assess the crime scene. Okay? So, what are some things that you have to do or establish during the phase 1? The offense must be determined. No? So, sabi ko nga, the investigating team will go there and assess what is the possible crime involved. Is it a homicide? Is it a theft? Is it a robbery? Depending on the available evidence or circumstances or appearance of the crime scene. Okay? The second, suspect can be arrested if they are present at the crime scene, or they can conduct hot pursuit operation, no? If applicable. Then crime scene also must be protected. No? Yan yung sinasabi ko kanina. No? You have to protect the crime scene, but of course, before you protect the crime scene, as investigators and as part of the procedure, you have to consider life first. In other words, as I said a while ago, you have to consider medical attention, bring injured people to a nearest hospital. No? You know, ideally speaking, no? Uh, even there are gunshot wounds or serious wounds, no? It is best and better to bring the person to the nearest police hospital or clinic, no? Okay, not to the nearest funeral parlor. Okay, yeah, or else you will face a charge administratively and criminal, no? Because again, the police have no authority to declare whether a person is dead or alive. Of course, in a common sense, no aspect, when the head of the victim or injured person at the crime scene is 2 meters away from his body, then basically, common sense, the person is dead. Okay? And the next thing that you will do, if that's the case, then protect the crime scene. How to protect the crime scene? Use a police line to barricade the area. In the absence of police line, you can use other similar uh, things like rope. Kung wala, chair. Kung wala, you can use human barrier. No? And of course, maintain one exit and one entrance, and you guard it so that no one can just enter the crime scene without authority thereof. Okay? Yeah, that is to protect the integrity. No? Again, the universal rule when entering a crime scene, pag ikaw ay papasok sa isang crime scene kung saan nangyari yung krimen, because you know, the crime scene is considered the treasure island in criminal investigation, because this is where mostly physical evidence are being obtained sa crime scene. Okay? But of course, not all crimes have crime scene. No? But commonly, there is a crime scene. Okay, and again, going back to what I said a while ago, the universal rule before you enter a crime scene is to always wear gloves and other protective equipment. Gloves is very important. You have to use gloves, no? So that you will not transfer. If you touch something, then you will not contaminate it. Kaya to avoid MAC, meron tayong tinatawag na acronym na MAC. Kaya bakit natin pinoprotektahan ang crime scene? To avoid MAC. What is MAC? MAC. To avoid mutilation, to avoid what is letter A. No? What is letter A? Alteration. And lastly, to avoid contamination. Yan ang MAC. MAC. Okay? All right. Next is victim and witnesses are identified. Yeah. Basic statement be taken. You conduct interview. Then, of course, crime scene is being processed. Nandiyan lahat ng proseso. Uh, uh, you have to identify the evidence. So you have to search for evidence. Kaya may technique dyan. After searching of evidence, you have to mark them, you have to measure them, you have to sketch them, and you have to photograph them. In other words, you have to document them properly. Then after documenting them properly, uh, you may now lift the crime scene. No. The evidence, I should say. You lift the evidence properly and package it properly, and bring it properly to the crime laboratory if necessary for purposes of examination and for purposes of evidence in court. Yeah. Kaya kailangan dito sa evidence, kailangan sundin mo ang chain of custody. Kailangan i-record mo kung sino ang unang nag-receive, sino ang sumunod na nag-receive, anong oras, anong petsa, hanggang sa pinakalas, hanggang sa presentation of evidence. Okay? All right. So crime scene is being processed. All right? That is preliminary investigation. So sa preliminary investigation, commonly the target of this is at the crime scene, the processing of the crime scene. Okay, so the acronym preliminary investigation, there is an acronym for it. Proceed, render, effect, locate, interview, maintain, interrogate, note-taking, arrange, report, and yield responsibility to follow-up investigator or superior officer. Yeah. So after processing the crime scene, no, after doing the initial activities, then you may now proceed to phase 2. No. So commonly sa crime scene, pag na-process na lahat, natapos, no? At dito sa preliminary investigation, dito pwedeng pumasok ang SOCO, the SOCO team, kung kinakailangan as requested. Okay? So, in phase 2, pag natapos na ang crime scene investigation or SOCO, SOCO, CSI, crime scene investigation, they are just the same. No? So, pag natapos na ang crime scene, you may now lift or release the crime scene. Alisin mo na ang cordon, yung nilagay mong police line, then you may now release the area or the crime scene to the authorities. Kung private yan, then release it to the owner. Kung government property yan, release it to the head of office. And so forth. So yan ang ginagawa. Okay? So after that, after the crime scene, after investigating the crime scene, then you may now proceed to follow up or in-depth investigations. Kaya nga follow-up ang gagawin mo. So kung wala kang ginawang preliminary, then there is nothing to follow up. Parang check-up yan. Kung hindi ka nagpa-check up una, then basically wala kang magiging follow-up. Okay? So sa follow-up or in-depth, kaya nga sinabi niyang in-depth, you are going deeper the investigation. You will gather more evidence. You may conduct surveillance, you may conduct intelligence operations para madagdagan yung information, madagdagan yung evidence na pwede mong magamit to identify the suspect, locate the suspect, and provide for evidence in court. So dito sa follow-up, dito mo gagawin yung identification of the suspect, dito mo gagawin yung location of the guilty party, arrest. So commonly, dito nangyayari yung arrest. But pwede bang mangyari ang arrest sa preliminary? Yes, if the suspect is present at the crime scene upon arrival of the first responders. Yeah. Pero commonly speaking, wala kang makakitang suspect at the crime scene. So nangyayari commonly yung arrest after follow-up investigation or within follow-up investigation. Okay? So dito sa follow-up, you have to do more investigation. Was the crime scene processed properly, and so forth and so on. You read that. Okay? All right. After follow-up investigation, dito sa follow-up, binibuild mo na yung kaso. Binubuo mo na ang kaso. Kaya dito hindi madalian. no? So try to see the case of the flight attendant, no? Try to update yourself kung ilang araw nila ginawa. Then nag-file na sila ng kaso sa prosecution. Did they follow the phases? Kaya remember this, pag hindi mo sundin yung phases na yan, yung kaso mo is magiging mahina yan. Kung diretso ka sa concluding investigation, wala kang ginawang preliminary, wala kang ginawang follow-up, or diretso ka sa in-depth, or preliminary ka, then diretso ka na sa final or concluding. Sa follow-up, dito mo tinatighten yung kaso. Kasi dito ka nag-a-analyze ng evidence, sinasala mo yung evidence, then you get more evidence, analyze it to have a concrete evidence to establish a prima facie evidence that this is the suspect and this is the crime and these are the evidence that has been committed or produced. Okay? So after follow-up, then we can proceed to final or concluding investigation. So hindi ka pwedeng mag-proceed sa final or concluding investigation if you did not exert efforts to collect material evidence that will establish the crime and identify the suspect. Okay? So pag meron ka ng evidence, then you may now proceed to final or concluding investigation. Dito, pina-finalize mo na ang kaso, pina-finalize mo na ang filing of the case dito sa final or concluding investigation. Ano ang nangyayari? Ang police or ang investigator nagfa-file ang kaso ng kaso not to the court but to the prosecution. Kung sa atin, saan ka magsasampa sa Provincial Prosecutor's Office, sa fiscal. Yan. So yung fiscal, pag-receive ng complaint na na-file mo, example, nag-file ka ng complaint against Pedro, then maggagawa ng preliminary investigation ang fiscal or ang prosecutors to determine if there is probable cause to file a charge against a person in the proper court. No? So, dito, sa final or concluding investigation, ang isipin nyo lang, this is the stage of investigation where investigators now finalize the case. In other words, the crime that is being committed, supported by evidence, and the suspect who is possibly guilty or probably guilty of the crime as charged. And dito, ginagawa sa final or concluding investigation yung filing of complaint, no? Complaint after determining prima facie evidence in the prosecutor's office. Yeah. So they review the suspect arrest, review all suspect statements, then they now arrange or review all information and file the case in the prosecution. Yeah. So, nagtatapos na ba ang kaso? So remember this, kailan nagiging considered na solved ang isang kaso? Or isang kaso na hinahawakan ng isang investigator in the PNP, for example. Number one, a case is solved when a crime or a case is filed before the court. Yan. Pag nasampahan na yung tao sa korte, nagkaroon ng preliminary investigation, na isampa yung kaso sa korte, then basically the case is solved. No? Mas maganda pa ang pag na-convict yung tao, after final conviction of the crime charge, mas magandang yun ang pwede mong i-consider na solved. But the mere that a case is filed before the court, not in the prosecution, in the court, then that is considered case solved. But remember this, kahit na isampa yung kaso sa korte or sa prosecution, hindi pa nagtatapos doon ang trabaho ng isang investigator. Hindi natatapos ang trabaho mo as investigator hanggang hindi pa tapos na nabigyan ng judgment ang isang tao. So remember, you have to do everything properly and legally. Alright? So yan. Yeah. So remember this, pag wala kang makuhang evidence doon sa first phase and second phase, then there is nothing to proceed in the phase 3, which is final or concluding investigation. Kaya pag walang final or concluding investigation, nagiging unsolved ang isang kaso. Alright? So that is the importance of these 3 phases of criminal investigation, that all these 3 phases must be completed starting from the first, second, and third in order to have a successful criminal investigation. Alright? So that is a very rigid process that you have to undergo. But as investigators, if you put your actions legally, constitutionally, then basically you will uh, attain these 3 phases of criminal investigation. And again, finally, if you attend and completed the phases of criminal investigation, then basically you will serve justice and you are a successful criminal investigator. Okay? So, yeah, all of these phases are important and it affects each other. All right, so those are the phases of criminal investigation. Okay, so please do not forget these phases of criminal investigation. Sa intelligence naman, meron ding cycle of intelligence. That is your assignment. What are the cycle of intelligence? Itong cycle naman, bago ka mag-produce ng intelligence, a product, then you have to undergo these processes. Okay? Alright. Ganon din dito sa criminal investigation. Bago mo sampahan ng kaso, ng isang kaso na criminal, ang isang akusado or suspect of a crime, kailangan dumaan ka sa proseso. This is what we call due process of law. Kailangan may preliminary, may follow-up, then if there is evidence, sufficient evidence, then you may now proceed and file the necessary charge. Dito, sa phase 3, dyan na nakakaroon ng yung pangatlo na aim of investigation, that is to prove the guilt of the guilty party. That is, or that happens in the final or concluding investigation, because the investigator, when the charge is filed before the court, you will still appear as witness by the prosecution to prove the guilt of the suspect or accused. Okay, so those are the phases of criminal investigation, and that's the end of my discussion in this particular topic. And with that, thank you and good day. All right.